In this video we'll be running the numbers of the Vindicare and Eliminators and also comparing them to a few other top class Imperial snipers. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Around a few months ago we did a video comparing Eliminators and Space Marine Scouts in terms of their sniping damage output. The outcome being that the Eliminators basically outclass the Scouts against almost every single target in every situation, and also more durable against all but dedicated anti-tank fire. This led me to wonder how they'd compare against the Vindicare and some of the other decent sniper options that we can find across the wider Imperial range. In this video we'll take a look at the damage output of both the Eliminators and the Vindicare against a few likely targets, and have a bit of a discussion as to their relative advantages and disadvantages within a list. So let's jump right into it then and take a look at the numbers. So these numbers represent our various snipers taking aim at some likely character targets. Our contenders are these. First we have the Vindicare, then 3 bolt sniper rifle Eliminators, then these same Eliminators when they happen to be in the Raven Guard tactical doctrine. Then we have another interesting Space Marine sniper option, the Phobos Captain armed with Ex Tenebris, which is one of the special Raven Guard relics and will also give him the advantage of the Raven Guard tactical doctrine on top of that. Ex Tenebris is an Assault 3 36-inch range weapon with Strength 4, AP-3 in tactical doctrine and a flat damage of 2. It also ignores cover to boot, so it's certainly a potent weapon when put in the hands of a Ballistic Skill 2+ Space Marine Captain. Next we have some AdMech, 5 Skitarii Rangers armed with 2 transuranic arquebuses. These guns are spectacularly long range with strength of 7, AP-2 and a damage of D3, with the option that sniper weapons often have to get the mortal wounds on 6s if you roll that to wound. They're also quite cheap at 59 points. And then even cheaper we've deployed a Cadian command squad armed with regular sniper rifles that's a bit of a steal at just 32 points. Our snipers will be taking aim at a Guard Company Commander, a Space Marine Librarian, a Space Marine Smash Captain armed with a Storm Shield, and if they run out of characters to shoot, we'll see what happens if they plough their rounds into a vehicle. This first table just shows the raw damage output of each of these units, so this is not weighted for points in this one. We'll get on to that, but in the meantime I thought it would be good to actually have the raw numbers should anyone be interested in them. The Vindicare is strongest against the Space Marine Smash Captain, as his Extus rifle ignores invul saves, bypassing his greatest defense. I have calculated the average amount of wounds that a Vindicare assassin will put out, taking into account the chance he has of rolling a flat d6 damage if he happens to roll a 6, and also his headshot special rule, where when the opponent fails a save, he might do mortal wound on a 3-up, then a 4+, then a 5+, and so on. This does mean that even though we just have the raw numbers here, the Vindicare is likely to be very swingy. He might well do absolutely no damage at all if he misses his shot, for example, but if he does get a wound through, then he can spike the damage very high indeed. This actually isn't too bad a thing when you're shooting at characters, as basically the only reward you get is if you actually kill them, as they don't tend to degrade or anything. But it does make him a little bit less reliable if you're just trying to finish off an already injured character, as it's very much quite a lot of damage or nothing at all. Moving on, the Bolt Sniper Eliminators perform pretty well against all targets, and particularly so when they're augmented by the Raven Guard tactical doctrine. They're about the same when targeting a Guard Commander, a bit better when targeting a Space Marine Librarian, and still not significantly behind when they are targeting the Smash Captain with his 3+ invul. They are also the best choice on the list when you're targeting vehicles due to that +1 to hit and wound roll, with the Sergeant using his guided aim. The Phobos Captain with Ex Tenebris does perform pretty well across the board as well, putting 3 wounds on a Guard Commander, and only being slightly behind the Eliminators with the Raven Guard tactical doctrine. He's also very similar in terms of damage output against vehicles, and he'll usually get his 2 wounds through from Ex Tenebris. The Cadian and Skitarii Rangers aren't quite as overwhelming, but that's partly because they're such cheap units and therefore don't really stand up on a unit per unit basis. So let's move on to take a look at how well all of these units do when they're weighted for how much they cost in points. Now the Vindicare and the Phobos Captain are the most expensive options here, so they're the most punished by the transformation, to seeing how good they are weighted point for point. Overall, across the board, it seems to be the Cadian Command Squad that actually does the most damage point for point against all targets besides the Space Marine Librarian, where the Eliminators and particularly the Raven Guard Eliminators edge them out slightly. This is honestly just because they're so cheap, and the AP nothing and mortal wounds that their rifles put out actually make them better against the Guard Commander and Space Marine Smash Captain, where high AP doesn't really matter at all. I will say that this doesn't necessarily make them the best snipers, despite having the highest damage output point for point, for reasons we'll get onto. As we said, the Eliminators do pretty well across the board, generally coming second. The Phobos Captain remains a strong contender against Guard Commanders and Space Marine Librarians, but falls down a bit on the tougher targets. In terms of point-for-point damage output, the Vindicare is actually the worst against Guard Commanders and Space Marine Librarians, and also vehicles, but he still remains pretty strong against the Smash Captain. Finally, those Skitarii Rangers have a fairly reasonable damage output across the board as well, in particular being fairly strong against vehicles with those Strength 7 rifles. We'll say that they really are quite a strong little unit, as in addition to this decent damage output against sniping characters, they also have a few of their rifle shots as well, and they occupy a troop slot, meaning that you can easily spam as many of them as you want to while filling out battalions, so they do have some decent advantages over this considerable raw sniping power. Finally, let's talk about some of the other external factors that can influence our choice of one unit over the other. The Vindicare has a whole host of special rules, including ignoring cover, which can certainly help against targets with high armor saves, and also while standing still he ignores negative penalties to hit, so Elatok characters or Alpha Legion or Raven Guard won't be any harder to hide from him. He himself also has character protection, which is considerable in terms of keeping his damage output on the board for the vast majority of the game. In general, you're free to set up your Vindicare somewhere screened behind your lines, maybe on a high building or something with good lines of sight, and it'll be pretty much guaranteed to plink away at the enemy army the entire game long, as on top of the character protection he's quite obnoxious to remove anyway, with his stealth suit giving him -2 to hit. This is somewhat of a double-edged sword though, because as you can't shoot him, then all the other guns will be focused on the rest of your army, so it doesn't exactly add any durability to your army as a whole. And if you do lose everything but him, then you've probably lost the game anyway. So character protection is good for him, but doesn't necessarily help out the durability of your whole army. He has a couple of stratagems from the Officio Assassinorum detachment, one of the best being that he can shoot twice for just 1 command point investment, so it's quite nice if character killing is going to be a major factor of the game, then you can turn that up a bit by spending that command point. He also has the option for the Turbo Penetrator round, which could be a decent way to finish off a vehicle with some degree of reliability. Finally, on the downside though, he does require either his own detachment or 2 command points to buy him in via the Requisition Sanctioned stratagem, which doesn't do him any favours for including in your army organisation wise, and on top of that, if you are using some sort of army specific generalised buff such as combat doctrines or Grey Knight's Tides of the Warp for example, he will very much break that, which means that realistically most Space Marine players are never going to include him if it's the difference between gaining or losing combat doctrines. Eliminators on the other hand have their own advantages and disadvantages. Firstly, over the Vindicare they can be targeted, but they are quite tough with a 1+ save in cover, so abnormally durable to high AP weapons, but they do always fail on a 1. They have 2 additional ammo types, including the Hyperfrag round and the Executioner round, which they can choose to fire if it's better than the Mortis round that I used for the comparison in this video, should they desperately need to get an extra wound on a character out of line of sight, or if they need to chip in their firepower to try and thin out a horde. Space Marines are able to stack a whole ton of buffs and are a lot more supported than the Vindicare would ever be. They might be able to get additional rerolls from captains and lieutenants. They'll get a chapter trait for free, which we haven't counted in here. Things like Imperial Fist's extra hits on 6s, or the tried and tested Master Artisan rerolls, will both decently increase the damage output of these guys. If they're in a pure Space Marine list, then they'll also be able to access the Devastator Doctrine turn 1, making those Mortis round bolt sniper rifles AP -3 and particularly good against ploughing through heavily armoured targets. In addition to all of that, they also have the best melee with Shock Assault on this entire list, getting 11 attacks in close combat at strength 4, so are a touch more flexible than some of the other options. Finally, I thought I'd just mention the Cadian Command Squad, seeing as they do seem to win the damage output contest against anything but the highest armoured targets. The reason why I don't think that you see them played quite as much is that they're ridiculously easy to bring down compared with Eliminators or the Vindicare. Guardsmen fold very easily indeed, and you'll only need a bolter or 2 to wipe out half the squad. They're also a little bit trickier to field, requiring you to have company commanders in your list in the first place, which is fairly likely but is a bit of a restriction. Their damage output also drops off much harder compared with the other options, as they both have to have -1 to hit for heavy weapons and also lose the reroll ones that they get with Cadians. On the plus side though, they do get the benefit of orders if there are any about, and there are plenty of guard stratagems and synergies that can be used on them, particularly things like overlapping fields of fire if you really want to focus all of your sniper fire on one model. Overall, in my opinion, I think the Eliminators still reign supreme on this list. They do have their pros and cons, but they combine incredibly decent damage outputs with good survivability and the option to gain access to a whole ton of buffs through the Space Marine Codex. The Vindicare has its positives, mainly not being able to be targeted so he can keep up that rain of fire all game long, but with his points bump and the increasing cost to the stratagem to buy him in, he's just not quite as efficient as he once was, particularly if you're thinking about including him in Space Marine lists where getting rid of combat doctrines is a big deal. It's been fun to look into though. I was interested in the numbers behind these guys, and particularly looking into things like the Transduramic Arquebuses and the numbers on Ex Tenebris as well. If there's anything that I've missed, or you have any other opinions on which are the strongest Imperial snipers right now, then let me know down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we have regular 40k content coming out pretty much every day. And if you'd like to support the channel and you happen to live in the UK, I do have an Element Games affiliate link down in the description below. If you are thinking about buying in some Warhammer 2 build in the near future, Element stocks basically all of Games Workshop's products and offers them at a slight discount, and if you click that link down in the description before ordering, a small proportion goes to Auspex Tactics without costing you a single penny more. So if you were going to order in something anyway, then it can be a good way to support the channel. In any case, a big thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.